Rumor has it that in a posh New York City bar, what would have been one of the most infamous trades in baseball history was agreed upon over drinks by two high-profile baseball executives. Scribbled on a cocktail napkin was a deal that involved two of the most iconic players of their generation. Fortunately, in the morning, the trade was called off, because trying to imagine either player in the other uniform is simply unthinkable. For Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams have come to define the very organizations for which they played their Hall of Fame careers. And that's due in large part to their respective achievements during one incredible season. Major League Baseball Productions presents 1941, Summer of Legends.
In 1941, they were both kind of comets just appearing in the sky. When you look back at events, you see people as they ultimately became and don't see them as they were at the time.
Joe DiMaggio joined the Yankees in 1936 and was an instant star.
A shining star. One who helped lead the Yankees to World Series titles in each of his first 4 seasons. It was almost as if he was born to play the game.
DiMaggio was the persona of Major League Baseball.
He's been called by some the perfect player, a stylist, but even more, a hustling ball player.
When asked why he played so hard every inning of every game, he said, because somebody might be in the stands who never saw me play before.
In his every physical action, he was the personification of grace.
But he handled himself with grace, with class. He dressed impeccably. He seemed to handle himself and his fame so well.
He's the greatest player I ever saw, and I have so much respect for him and admiration.
I don't have to talk about his hitting. We have been talking about this for a long time.
Ted really was married to his trade. He loved hitting a baseball more than anything else in the world.
Year after year, Williams has been one of baseball's great hitters.
Trying to throw a fastball by Ted Williams was like trying to sneak a sunbeam by a rooster in the morning.
He had a supreme confidence about himself. He was one of those guys that thought he was the best in everything.
The lanky Red Sox with the awesome swing told people flatly that he intended to become the greatest hitter in baseball history.
Both men had magnificent careers, but they will forever be best remembered for what they did during one memorable season.
Ted's greatest year was 1941 when he batted .406. He hit safely in every game from May 15th to July 16th, a streak of 56 consecutive games.
1941, that's a memorable year, yes.
2011 marks the 70th anniversary of that unforgettable summer, perhaps the last year of innocence in the United States.
That summer of '41 was so special. This was a country enjoying its last sort of exuberant breath of freedom.
When you see what happened at the end of 1941, how the world changed forever with Pearl Harbor, you see a last innocence.
This was just a summer of baseball heroes. I don't think anyone was really quite prepared for the two extraordinary records that would be set.
It all began in the nation's capital, where DiMaggio's Yankees faced off against the Senators, and a special guest was on hand.
There's a capacity crowd, including the first baseball fan of the nation, President Roosevelt.
For the very first time, a president who is beginning his 3rd term. As Franklin Roosevelt says, it was my 9th year in the majors.
The president threw out the first ball to open the baseball season.
And so this becomes a kind of magical moment in which a season begins with the sense that we could suspend all of that.
DiMaggio drove in the first run of the season, and in a sign of things to come, got a hit in his 20th straight contest, the first 19 being spring training games. Williams managed just 18 at-bats in all of April, thanks in part to an injury he incurred during camp.
He just sprained his ankle sliding during spring training. He could hit, but he couldn't play the field. Bobby Doerr always said that it changed his hitting stroke a little bit because he couldn't put a whole lot of weight on his right foot. He held back on the ball and got a better look at the ball. Ted always debated that and said that it wasn't so, but it's an interesting thing that maybe the ankle sprain really helped him to hit better.
Whatever the reason, Ted was batting .339 as of May 14th, and his Red Sox grabbed hold of second place in the American League. Things weren't quite as promising in the Bronx, where the Yankees languished in fourth place, and DiMaggio battled to escape a 10-day slump.
Here he was struggling along, and people were not happy about it. And it was probably the worst slump of his career.
Then, on May 15th, Joe got what at the time appeared to be a meaningless hit.
I recall it. It was a fellow by the name of Edgar Smith of the White Sox. I got a base hit. Didn't mean very much.
The first hit of the streak, it was in a pretty bad stretch for the Yankees. And in fact, the Yankees lost that game 13-1. So DiMaggio's opening hit was, of course, ignored.
It became impossible to ignore the exploits of either Joe or Ted as the season unfolded. A season played amid the backdrop of a nation hoping to avoid the specter of war.
I have tonight issued a proclamation that an unlimited national emergency exists.
America came together, stopped a baseball game to listen to a speech by the President of the United States. It's a wonderful baseball moment to stop and think and reflect on larger issues in a game that, unlike any other game, requires reflection.
There was much to reflect on June 2nd of '41, following the death of the man who had passed the Yankee torch to Joe DiMaggio.
We certainly lost not only a great ball player, but we all lost a friend.
It seemed like just yesterday, Lou Gehrig was playing with a vitality that defied belief.
Lou, I want to congratulate you on your wonderful career in playing 2,000 games without missing a game.
The Iron Horse had played in an unprecedented 2,130 consecutive games. And now, just shy of his 38th birthday, he was gone. He left behind one of the game's most notable streaks. Little did anyone know that the next Yankee legend would soon put up a number that also inspired awe. It was on the day of Gehrig's passing that both DiMaggio and Williams continued their consecutive game hitting streaks, a stretch dating back to that day in mid-May.
What was happening on May 15th, 1941, that both Williams and DiMaggio would start a hit streak?
Well, in truth, these two had plenty in common.
They're really very similar. They come up at the same time. They're both from the West Coast. They both sort of have an immigrant family connection.
Giuseppe Paolo DiMaggio was born in November of 1914, seemingly destined for a life on the water.
Joe DiMaggio's father was a fisherman in San Francisco, and the idea was that each of these sons would be fishermen and help him. The father's dream was we'd get a bigger boat, catch more fish, we'd all get rich from catching fish.
His mother would tell Giuseppe, his father, you know, Joe is sick, he's nauseous, and when the boys went fishing, Joe would go out and play baseball. So he always said, if not my mother, I probably would have been a fisherman.
Joe's brother Vince was the first to forego fishing to pursue a career on the baseball diamond.
My brother Vince signed with the San Francisco Seals, and Vince was a good ball player. But I thought at that time when he joined the San Francisco Ball Club, I said, well, if he can make it, I surely can.
So Joe also joined the Seals, where he offered a harbinger of things to come.
The amazing thing about DiMaggio is that he's constantly consistent, and that even in the Pacific League, he had a 61-game hitting streak that was, got everybody's attention.
In 1935, he hit .398, and soon, thanks to scout Bill Essick, would be a Yankee. But Essick also had his eye on another California slugger, one born in August of 1918 into a home with little guidance.
Ted's mother was very big in the Salvation Army, and she would go across the border to Tijuana and try and save souls. And Ted's father was pretty much an absent guy, so Ted and his brother kind of grew up without parental supervision. You could either find trouble or kind of find a sport to straighten you out. And Ted found baseball and spent this time learning the game.
I asked my father to take me out to California, to show me where he grew up. We went out to San Diego. The first thing we went to go see was his house. And he took us down the road and swung us by the baseball field where he hit.
It was on this field Williams earned quite a reputation, hitting over .580 as a high school pitcher-outfielder. Essex sought to sign him, but he had a battle on his hands with the real slugger of the household.
Bill Essex did like him as a ball player and tried to sign him, but his mother was really the one that had the power, and she didn't want him to go away. So that was why he signed with the San Diego Padres.
After 2 years with the Padres in the Pacific Coast League, the supremely confident Williams signed with the Boston Red Sox at the age of 19.
When I saw him in the Coast League, he was only 17, 18 years of age, but boy, he could swing a bat.
He was very cocky, and, he was going to, when he went to spring training and they were telling him about, wait till you see Jimmy Fox and those guys hit, and he said, wait till they see me hit.
He would love to say, well, they don't think I can do it, and I'll show them I can do it.
And in his first big league season with Boston in 1939, he backed up his bluster with his bat. Had there been a Rookie of the Year award back then, Ted would have undoubtedly taken it home, setting a rookie record with an American League best 145 RBIs. By 1939, DiMaggio already had 3 World Series rings to his credit, and that year led the league with a .381 average.
In 1941, it kind of all came together for both of them.
On June 8, 1941, Joe got 4 hits in a doubleheader to extend his streak to 24 straight games. That same day, Boston swept a doubleheader, but Williams came up empty at the plate, thus ending the longest hitting streak of his career. Still, it was the number 400, which Ted was comfortably above at this point, that would define him in 41. But few were taking notice, for on June 10th, DiMaggio hit in his 25th consecutive game, and fans were buzzing about something special that was taking place in the Bronx.
On June 22nd, 1941, the German armies moved against their former pact partner.
When Germany invaded Russia, violating their non-aggression pact, it became clear that few, if any, would be immune to this escalating war.
People could see the terrible things that were happening around the world, and a lot of them believed that it was imminent, that the United States would be in the middle of it very soon.
Roosevelt is making noises that we have to gear ourselves and steel ourselves for war. Millions of people have been drafted.
That included 1940 American League MVP, Hank Greenberg.
It really was almost a national mourning period in Detroit when Greenberg was drafted. It was obvious he was going to miss the rest of the season because he was going to be working for Uncle Sam.
Meanwhile, the baseball season continued to unfold, a welcome diversion to a nervous nation.
Rizzuto talked about how he didn't want to see what was happening because every day was bad news. Instead, he would bury himself in the sports section because that allowed him to at least start the day with a smile.
And no one was a bigger story in sports at the time than his teammate.
Joe connects with a solid blow and clouts a mighty homer.
His 15th of the year made it 35 consecutive games with a base hit. And Joe seemed to realize that his streak was serving as a much-needed distraction.
Keeping the streak alive motivated DiMaggio in giving back to a country. It wasn't just New York fans. The entire country was rooting for Joe DiMaggio.
It isn't very often that a player the likes of this one comes along.
People have told me again and again and again how they'd be in a little cafe, and the question was, did he hit one? You didn't have to see who it was. You would just say, did he hit one? That meant DiMaggio.
If DiMaggio got the hit to extend the streak at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, by 2:15 it was on the radio.
Got it on the radio, but we got it in the newspapers dramatically every day.
They would have DiMaggio as the primary attraction for that day's game, and that was when the streak really became something of a phenomenon.
Going to school. Every day I wanted to know whether he had continued that hitting streak.
Did he get a base hit tonight or today? And yeah, he did, so you look forward to today again.
And his friendly rival in Boston was no different.
Williams was always aware of what DiMaggio was doing and aware of the attention
On the ticker tape, they would have every DiMaggio at bat. So the guy in the scoreboard would yell out to Ted, "Joe just doubled to left field," and Ted would pass it on to Dominic.
He would yell over to me, "Dommy," he says, "Joe got a base hit in the first inning." We were on top of it all the time.
With each passing day, Joe crept closer to baseball history.
When he got past the Yankee streak, which was at 29, Hornsby was at 33, it was all increasingly momentous and increasingly weighing heavier upon him.
By the time he gets up to 37, it's very acute, because this is for real.
You almost forget about winning the game. You want to make sure he got that base hit and then play the game. And if somebody didn't get on in the last inning and he was 0 for 3, they'd find a way to get on, give him that extra time at bat.
Like old reliable Tommy Henrik, who helped make it 38 straight with a key 8th inning at bat.
With a man on first, Henrik gets permission to go up there and bunt because he was afraid to hit into a double play and deny DiMaggio his final at-bat at keeping the streak going.
So he bunted the runner over, and Joe got his chance to come up in the 8th with the hitting streak on the line, and true to Joe's fashion, lined the ball into left field and keep the hitting streak alive.
Joe's streak had become front-page news, but not everyone was rooting for him.
We didn't care whether there were streaks going or not. Any pitcher was out on the pitcher's mound trying to stop him.
To stop him meant your name in lights, and it was a big thing. They all wanted to be that pitcher.
But no one could stop him, as Joe was now closing in on the record books.
The drumbeat of the press corps started as people were focusing on George Sisler's mark of 41.
And Joe continued to deftly handle the pressure.
It wasn't as though I had not hit in some consecutive games before that, because it was 1933 in Pacific Coast League that I hit in 61. So I had some experience in feeling the pressure. Well, you can understand I could withstand some of it.
He's the toughest son of a gun you ever saw. Pressure didn't mean anything to him. Pressure meant he's going to dig in more.
A Sunday doubleheader in Washington gave Joe the opportunity to tie and set a new American League record.
That day they had a full house for a doubleheader to see if DiMaggio could both tie and surpass Sisler.
He promptly laced a double off Dutch Leonard to match Sisler's AL mark of 41 straight games. His teammates were ecstatic and congratulated him between games. But in the euphoria that existed in anticipation of Game 2, the unthinkable took place, jeopardizing his streak.
In the first inning of the second game, DiMaggio suddenly went into a panic because he couldn't find his bat. Turns out someone had snuck into the dugout and stolen DiMaggio's baseball bat, which he called Betsy.
That was one of the few times that he showed how upset he was, because, ball players are very superstitious.
Suddenly he felt like he was playing baseball naked in front of 40,000 people. First couple at-bats, it just didn't feel right.
So once again, old reliable came through. For Joe remembered that he had once lent Henrik one of his bats.
He said, "Tommy, would you mind if I borrowed my bat back?" And of course, what's Tommy Henrik going to say? He said, "Yes, please, take it."
Then who had the inner fortitude to just shake it off and just keep hitting baseballs?
Who else but the Yankee Clipper, who singled in the 7th to pass Sisler and set a modern record with a hit in 42 consecutive games.
When you consider that he hit that many times with a base hit each and every time, it's unbelievable. That's 2 months of never making a game that you didn't get at least one hit.
Sisler sent his congratulations saying, "I'm glad a real hitter broke it." And once Joe arrived in New York, he got more good news.
A few of DiMaggio's friends found out that the bat had made its way to Newark, New Jersey, and through various forms of persuasion, the bat was returned to DiMaggio a couple of days later, and he was fully armed again for the latter stage of his hitting streak.
And he'd have to be, for as it was, the all-time mark had yet to be broken.
Hey, Peg, who's that walking up to the plate?
Joe DiMaggio. Started baseball's famous streak. He's got us all aglow. He's just a man and not a freak. Joe DiMaggio.
His hitting streak captured so many people's attention. Writers went scurrying to make sure that George Sisler's streak really was what it was.
And what they discovered made DiMaggio realize that there was still more work to be done.
I was reminded that that was not the record. The Major League record was Willie Keeler.
Willie Keeler had hit in 44 straight games in 1887. at a time when foul balls were not counted as strikes. But Joe never wavered and accepted the new challenge.
DiMaggio actually appreciated the fact that if you're going to add games to what I have to pursue, at least after somebody who's a Hall of Famer, somebody who also had been a Yankee before, so that meant a lot to him.
He continued to bang out hits, tying Keeler's mark of 44. He was now just one hit away from the all-time mark.
I didn't think about that as pressure. I just went ahead and played my game.
Keeler was known for the hit 'em where they ain't singles that helped him set the record. And DiMaggio would put a new twist on the old adage.
Of course, it's lefty who says, well, Joe did it just the way Wee Willie did. He hit 'em where they ain't.
He breaks Keeler's record by hitting a ball over Ted Williams' head. And all of a sudden, you begin to wonder what gods were manipulating baseball that summer, because it's just, in a way, too good to be true.
Joe's streak reached 48 before being put on hold by the All-Star game in Detroit, where he was joined on the American League team by a fellow having a pretty good season himself, hitting .405 at the time.
And here are the two superstars who cannot be matched in the game of baseball today. Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio.
They both played all 9 innings, and with the American League trailing in the 9th, they both played a prominent role in their team's comeback.
Joe had hit a ball that might have been the third out, and he just beat the play at first base.
The winning runs on the sacks, and look who's up. Ted Williams.
Well, I've always hit good in this Detroit park. They throw in where I'm swinging, and I'll be swinging. Might mean the old ball game.
There it goes, a home run.
As soon as he hit it, naturally I knew it was gone. Ted knew it was gone.
A home run by Ted Williams.
Oh, I was so happy and I was so proud. Then I saw myself galloping around the base and clapping my hands.
Yes, hitting that home run in the All-Star game in the 9th inning was certainly a big thrill, and I'll never forget the rest of my life.
There's the ball game and victory 7-5 for the American League All-Stars.
For the moment, Ted had grabbed the headlines from his Yankee counterpart, but Joe snatched them right back by continuing the streak.
Once he got into the 50s, he really started to embrace it and enjoy it, and he talked about it openly.
The Yankee Clipper connected for a number 55.
I pitched the 56th hit in his streak and scooted past me and past my shortstop, Lou Boudreau.
Safe hits in 56 consecutive games.
It seemed like it would never end, but the following day, the cab driver who took DiMaggio and teammate Lefty Gomez to the Cleveland ballpark offered a dire prophecy.
And the cabbie turned around and talked about how the Indians were going to end the streak on him today, and Gomez was very upset with the cab driver because he thought he jinxed DiMaggio.
He says, now don't pay much attention to what that fella said, that taxi driver.
Well, as it turned out, the cabbie wasn't the problem, but Cleveland third baseman Ken Keltner sure was.
DiMaggio had gotten 2 hits in a ball game by putting him by Keltner on his right side, right down the line. So he took 1 step back and 1 step closer to the foul line. Sure enough, DiMaggio hit 2 balls that night.
Backhanded the first one and had to straighten up, and then I wound up in foul territory. Then I had to get up and throw a strike to first base to get him by an eyelash.
And I repeated that play the next time I came to bat. He did the same thing directly.
But despite Keltner's heroics, Joe still had one last chance to keep the streak alive in the 9th. And a future Hall of Fame shortstop was all that stood in his way.
And then in the 9th inning, with a man on first base, he hit a wicked ground ball to my left. I took 2 steps to my left, and the ball took a bad hop.
Ball bounced up, hit him in the chest, he caught it through the Mac, first base, double play, and it was all over.
Ballpark was packed. You know, you could hear a pin drop.
DiMaggio's streak ended in Municipal Stadium in front of an enormous crowd in Cleveland, and people were worried that Ken Keltner might not be able to make it out of the stadium that day. I think that speaks to just how much DiMaggio's streak mattered, not only to New York, not only to the Yankees, the team, but to everybody else.
The Yankee Clipper and teammate Phil Rizzuto walked back to their hotel together, but DiMaggio then chose to be alone with his thoughts.
He asked me to wait with him till everybody had gone, and then he and I walked out.
And as they were about a block or 2 away from their hotel, DiMaggio saw an open bar and said, I'm going to head in here.
And I started to go in with him. He said, no. He says, you go back to the hotel. He says, I just want to be alone. And I started to walk up, and he said, wait a minute. I guess he had reached in his pocket.
DiMaggio said, by the way, I don't have any money. Can you lend me a couple of bucks?
I think I had like about $13.50 for a 2-week road trip.
That image stayed with Rizzuto for the rest of his life, the idea that when he had to kind of come to terms with failure for the first time in almost 2 months, he wanted to be by himself.
And for those who thought that Joe might now take a break, well, the very next day, he began a 16-game hitting streak. Ted Williams, meanwhile, was hitting an astounding .413 with just 15 games left in the regular season. And suddenly he was the man of the hour.
Sharing 1941's batting limelight was the golden boy of Boston's outfield, Ted Williams.
All of a sudden, the sort of millipede of the press attention ran over to his clubhouse, and we started talking and thinking and praying for Ted.
Superman debuted on the silver screen in September of 1941. But by then, baseball fans already knew that superheroes were no fantasy. They were first captivated by Joe DiMaggio's incredible feat of hitting in 56 consecutive games. For more than 2 full months in the midst of the season, everyone seemed to be focused on Joe.
It was all DiMaggio all the time, every day, even for the most casual fan and for people who weren't fans.
But once DiMaggio's streak was snapped, the spotlight shifted to still another superhuman effort that was being played out on a daily basis, one that commanded attention come late September.
It took a little bit of time, but then all of a sudden, as you're moving towards the end of the season, you said, wow, somebody might hit 400.
The 400 hitter of today at the plate, Ted Williams.
Just 23 years old, Ted was looking to become the youngest player ever to hit 400.
Ted Williams, who packs a Babe Ruth wallop in that bat of his.
He wasn't jabbing line drives or beating out infield hits. He was hitting 400 with power.
Williams wallops a tremendous drive into the center field bleachers. A home run.
With just 6 games left in the regular season, Ted was hitting 406. But during that final week, he went into a slump.
Pitch to Williams, a swing and a miss on a fastball.
And as a result, his batting average tumbled to just below 400. 2 games remained, a doubleheader against the A's in Philadelphia. And the realization that he just might miss out on a 400 season began to weigh on Ted.
He was tense the night before. He apparently spent 3 or 4 hours walking the streets of Philadelphia with Johnny Orlando, the clubhouse man.
We were discussing it, and I was a little worried about it for the first time. I never realized I had hit 400 all year long, well over 400. And now I got a chance to be under 400.
The circumstances of the end of the season have sort of become legendary, and in some cases they're at variance with the actual facts.
He was hitting 399.55.
The batting average of 399.55 would not have been regarded as a 400 season. To hit 400, you have to hit .40000. That was the rule then. It's the rule now.
But at the time, it was common belief that Ted's average would be rounded up to 400 if he sat out the doubleheader.
That was the last thing in my mind.
His manager, Joe Cronin, approached him and could see right away that Williams was like, I'm playing.
He did just mention it to me, and I mean, that was passed over real fast.
He said, Tony, they asked me if I wanted a day off, I was going to sit on that, and I said, hell no, I want to play.
Honest to goodness, I never give it a thought that I wasn't going to play.
Oh, damn it, I had to play.
I never even thought about not playing.
He's either going to hit 400 or better playing, but he wasn't going to sit out.
Ted Williams would never back into any record.
He had no fear. He approached it as, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to show you I can do it.
I wanted it more than anything, more so than anything in my life.
That's who Ted Williams was.
You didn't want anybody to come back and say, hey, Ted, yeah, you hit 400, but you know, if you would have played that last, gone 0 for 4, yeah, you had a stunk, you hit 399. At 399, you stink.
If you accept that a batting average of 3.996 would have been rounded off to 400, and certainly that's what everyone believed at the time. You could say that Williams could have sat out that final doubleheader and still been a 400 hitter, but he would not have been Ted Williams.
So Ted Williams suited up as though it were any other day. But that still didn't mean he'd get anything to hit. In 4 separate games against the A's that year, Ted drew at least 3 walks.
Ted told me that one of the ball players on the A's had come up and said, "Mr. Mack says we're going to pitch to you."
Manager Mack had told the A's that if anybody did anything to help Williams, that they would be immediately released.
Ted Williams coming up, and you can hear that crowd in the background.
I was worried about just hitting the ball hard. And I knew if I hit the ball hard, I had a hell of a chance.
He walks to the plate his first time up, and the umpire, Bill McGowan, takes a few seconds to wipe off home plate, looks up at Williams and said, for a man to hit 400, he's got to be loose.
You got to stay loose. And that's the last thing Dad had going through his ears when he started to hit.
Williams goes out, gets a hit his first time up.
Williams singles sharply to right.
And after his second hit, he was really never in danger of falling below 400 by making an out in his next at-bat. And so he just kept playing and just kept hitting.
And he went a phenomenal 4 for 5.
He had a good first game, and they said, "You want to sit this one out?" He said, "No, not me."
This despite the fact that an 0 for 5 second game would put him right back under 400.
He didn't back down from any kind of challenge.
Ted Williams up.
He wanted it. He thrived on it.
A line drive doubled in right field.
Watch me. Watch me now.
That's it.
Yes, 2 more hits in Game 2 was it. A hard-earned 406 batting average.
Ted Williams with a solid smash to right center field for 2 bases.
Oh, I was pleased that I'd hit 400. I thought, well, I'm going to hit 400 some more because I'm just getting started here.
But tomorrow never came for Ted, nor for anyone else. And he remains the last man ever to hit 400 for the season.
Talk about uplifting. The numbers got uplifted, but so did the country, so did he, so did we. It's pretty spectacular that he raised his average and raised the rest of us up on that last day of the season. It's just one of the great stories in all of baseball lore.
Boston Law
to all the games tonight at 6 on MLB Network.
1941 certainly was special because I did get into my hitting streak, but that wasn't the most important thing. We won the pennant and went on to win the World Series.
The New York Yankees had regained their title of champions of the baseball world.
With the 41 season now history, the debate raged on over who had the more incredible year, Joe DiMaggio or Ted Williams.
Joe connects with a solid blow and clouts a mighty 2-run homer.
Williams became just the 8th different player in the modern era to hit 400. He also hit 37 home runs to earn the distinction as the only American leaguer ever to hit 400 and collect 30 or more home runs. He would have won the Triple Crown too, but fell 5 RBIs short of, well, guess who?
DiMaggio swings and smashes the ball against the right field wall for a 2-base hit.
Yes, Joe did hit in 56 straight games in 41, and 72 out of 73. But if you look even deeper, you realize what an amazing year he had.
You have to realize that there was another record set. He struck out 13 times and 541 at-bats. That's unheard of in baseball today for a slugger.
We have guys do that in a week, and sometimes on 3 or 4 games. It's amazing.
This important round tripper puts the Yanks ahead 2-1.
Choosing an MVP between the two of them was a task that even they found difficult.
It was by the very narrowest of margins. And I guess it's true, it would have not been too bad had it been right down the middle because he did have a fantastic year.
DiMaggio was a veteran. He probably deserved it. Had been in the league longer than Williams. And Ted, his first few years, was a little bit of outspoken to the press, and a lot of writers might not have voted for him for that reason.
Oh, you can definitely make a case for Williams for MVP just because his numbers were so staggering. But I do think, especially in those years, people who voted for the award tended to think of the most valuable player as being the most valuable player.
With that in mind, the Yankees were 5.5 games back when DiMaggio began his streak, and were 6 games up and on their way to the pennant when it ended.
The heck with your individual averages. I'll take the guy that did more for winning the pennant for you. And as far as I'm concerned, when DiMaggio started hitting, he picked the whole ball club up.
Joe did indeed win his second MVP award. But of even greater personal significance was winning his 5th World Series title in 6 years.
If the Yankees lost the World Series and Joe had the MVP, if it meant anything to him, he'd rather give up the MVP to win the World Series, and he got both.
Ted and Joe had brought baseball fans a season to remember. But just 2 months later, the nation was forced to go to war, and games of any kind seemed nothing short of trivial.
In the face of this devastating wake-up call of an attack on Pearl Harbor, the relevance of baseball came into question. What are we doing playing a game when Americans are going to go off and start dying in numbers we hadn't seen since the Civil War? Should we play it? And Commissioner Landis wrote President Roosevelt and said, what should we do?
It was then the president penned what was called the Green Light Letter, informing the commissioner that America needed baseball to continue as a necessary respite from the war.
The armed forces overseas demand that we play baseball. The fans here in this country want to see our national game continue.
And that it did, despite the fact that hundreds of players, many of them in the prime of their careers, left baseball to serve their nation.
There's 4 players that were involved in the height of their career that missed 3 or more years. Feller, Greenberg, DiMaggio, and Williams.
The 1942 season did see Ted win the Triple Crown, and DiMaggio still another pennant. But then it was time for both men to trade uniforms.
How do you like playing for the Army, Joe? I don't mind it very much at all. As a matter of fact, I'm quite enjoying it. Although I'm looking forward someday to getting back with the Yankees.
Because I spent 3 years, Ted, he spent 5 years. That is really remarkable. I mean, he'd have had the most offensive records of all time.
There's no telling what Ted's career numbers would have been had military service not intervened. But there's no denying that the marks they both set in 1941 made that Summer of Legends truly special.
Both the 406 of Williams and the 56 straight games by DiMaggio are great numbers, but to have them happen in the same year, to have DiMaggio and Williams excelling at the same time, you would never get back to a time when 2 men could dominate one league the way DiMaggio and Williams did.
We're here today to raise the flag of victory over the capital of our greatest adversary.
Since December of 1941, the United States has fought a handful of wars, put a man on the moon, and witnessed the invention of the internet. But the shining accomplishments of Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio in that magical season have remained unequaled. And each passing year has elevated these men to an iconic status that few to ever play the game have reached.
Please welcome the greatest hitter that ever lived, number 9, Ted Williams.
Teddy Ballgame was the center of attention at the unveiling of the all-century players before the 1999 All-Star Game in Boston. At the age of 39, he added to his legend by almost hitting 400 again, falling just 5 hits short. Now he was in the presence of some of the men who had tried to match his achievement back in 1941.
He loved watching Rod Carew when Carew one year was at about 385 in July. He came in and posed for pictures for us at Sports Illustrated with Carew. He loved the thrill of the chase for those other players.
Every single time George Brett, Tony Gwynn ever got close, he would be pulling for them. He wanted to see them do it.
In August of 1994, a surging Tony Gwynn found his groove and lifted his batting average to .394.
A line drive left center.
In my own mind, I thought I could get there. Now, how September was gonna go, I didn't know, but I would have loved to have gotten to that point.
But September never came for baseball, as a player's strike shortened the season. 14 years earlier, George Brett did get to chase history through an entire season, but it may have worked against him.
With 2 weeks to go in the season and I'm still over 400, I said this is kind of important. And so then I did the one thing that I shouldn't have done. I went out and tried to hit 400. Then I really started pressing. I was so close.
But close doesn't count in this case, as Brett finished at 390. Throughout the years, the game has seen a select few talented players raise their average to the lofty heights of 360 and above. But none of them could gain entry to the 400 club. It's partly a change in the culture of how pitchers are used that has added new difficulties to the quest, rooted in the evolution of the game.
Now you face so many pitchers throughout a game. You face a starter, middle relief, setup guy, and a closer. Hitting 400 for an entire season, unheard of.
The very same factor probably hinders anyone hoping to challenge DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak. Just recently, a small group of players managed to hit in 30 or more straight games. No small feat.
And the streak moves to 33 in a row.
Shortstop Jimmy Rollins fashioned a 36-game streak, the longest of the 21st century.
There's a hit, and he didn't waste any time extending it.
But still a world away from DiMaggio's 56.
It's a high number. It's definitely a number that's way out there in space somewhere until somebody's able to get there.
In 1987, Hall of Famer Paul Molitor inched even closer than Rollins.
39 in a row. How about that? That is something.
But the fact is, Pete Rose is the only man since 1941 to even cross the 40 straight game mark, which he did in 1978.
Base hit! He did it! 43 in a row for Rose.
But when the game's all-time hit king was stopped after 44 consecutive games, it made the number 56 seem even more daunting.
The night I broke my streak, I hit 2 ropes. I couldn't hit two balls any harder. I hit a line drive to Mick Williams, the ball went right in his glove.
The fact that he only got into the 40s and then it was over for him. You came to realize almost at that moment, nobody's going to get to 56.
Well, there is one former major leaguer who impressed DiMaggio by hitting in 58 straight games. But Robin Ventura performed his feat in college.
I don't care if you play Little League or any kind of baseball, they're hitting 58 straight games. That's fantastic.
So, is DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak the most untouchable record in all of sports? Well, consider that someone would have to pitch 3 straight no-hitters to beat Johnny Vandermeer. And both Cy Young's 511 wins and Cal Ripken's 2,632 consecutive games played both seem safe. And then there is the question of whether anyone will ever hit 400 again. No one is certain, but there is no doubt that the thrill would be in the chase.
I wish I could say when it would be, because I'd like to see it. I'd like to be a part of it.
Well, as far as records are concerned, I believe that all records are made to be broken.
We love to see people get close to it, and we love to see them succeed, and we love to see them fail, too.
If someone were to break DiMaggio's hitting streak, if someone were to bat over 400 as Ted Williams last did in 1941, it wouldn't mean we'd forget them, because what that season did for both Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams is make them immortal.
The legacies of both Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams are not only stronger than ever, but are so identified with their franchises, it is hard to fathom that the course of history could have been altered by a rumored trade made on a cocktail napkin some 6 years after their time-tested feats.
Williams-DiMaggio would have been a fascinating trade. Joe was geared to play in Fenway Park. And Ted was geared to play in the old Yankee Stadium with the short porch down the right field line. I don't think either player would have been quite in the other city. As it turns out, I think the history of both franchises was saved by the fact that there was coffee in the morning.
Apocryphal or not, the alleged late-night trade might have changed the careers of both Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio. but it never would have altered the transcendent events that took place in 1941, the Summer of Legends. I'm Ed Burns. Thanks for watching.